And you've met now some of the businesses and the local people from the parks, the Alpi Marittimi and the Le Mercantour parks in France and Italy. And I hope you've now discovered that it's not just us trails people or parks people or nature conservationists who are passionate about their places. You saw there the local people who care passionately about their area and how they want to live and work in harmony with the nature and the culture that's around about that, and share that with those who come to visit their spaces. So, just before I jump into my presentation, I want to just take the opportunity to reflect on a couple of things I heard this morning, if that's okay with you. EUROPARC has worked in the sustainable tourism arena for about 20 years, and we deliberately call it sustainable tourism. The word regenerative tourism is quite new to me, and it's, as far as I'm aware, not widely used in Europe. So we really think of sustainable tourism as being in balance with nature, being able to continue to be rooted in the Sustainable Development Goals, to do no harm, and to consider the social, economic and environmental aspects of all parts of the tourism chain that impacts on a particular area. It took us a long time to get public administrations and indeed the tourism sector to get to that point of sustainable. It's going to take another bit of a nudge to get them to regenerative. Because I would contend that not all ecotourism is sustainable. I would also contend that not all nature tourism is sustainable. And I'm not yet sure if regenerative tourism is fully sustainable, but I definitely want to embrace the nature positive principles that were spoken about this morning. And you asked one question this morning. I've lost the lady who was speaking. You asked if trails were part of the regenerative, or as I would say, sustainable tourism. And I possibly was the only person in the room that didn't go, yes! Because my answer was, it depends. And it depends for parks too, not singling out the trails community. Just being in nature, or your trails taking people into nature, or espousing nature values, does not per se make the visitor offer or experience sustainable or indeed regenerative. In many places I see nature as being used as the backdrop, but the practice, it could be just about anywhere. Never mind in a nature space. So that was just a couple of reflections. I've added an extra minute onto my time just as I was reflecting on the conversation this morning. Okay, so I promised you just to say a few words about the EUROPARC Federation, because I know a lot of people have been asking me, because I feel like a bit of an interloper in your trails network. So we are a member association, just like the World Trails Network. I think we're the sister network to you, or the cousin, whatever. We are a members association, as I said. We have 400 members in 40 countries. That's thousands of parks and protected areas. And we support our parks to protect nature, to promote sustainability, and we do that ostensibly just as you are doing here by bringing people together. So we connect people, and we connect policy and practice. We share ideas, we share time together, we share our frustrations, we share our challenges, and more importantly, we share our solutions. And we do that by creating programs, by creating projects, a lot of policy and advocacy work, and of course, one of the main programs that I'm going to talk to you about today is our Charter for Sustainable Tourism in Protected Areas. Now, our members, of course, have trails within them, between them, to and from them. And those trails, of course, take us to places for nature. They take us to places that are important for climate change adaptation and mitigation. They take us ostensibly to places that just sustain us. And they take us to places that people want to escape to. Now, over 20 years ago, EUROPARC, in response to many of our members' concerns about visitor management in their parks and protected areas, were seeking for a solution. And it was from that our Charter for Sustainable Tourism was born. Pythagoras said, when he wasn't measuring triangles, to leave the road and take the trails. Now, he didn't just mean that literally, that also, but metaphorically too, to move away from order and systems and conventions and try a new way, a new experiment on what could be. And that's what EUROPARC did. We could have gone down the road of compliance and regulations to manage our visitors, but instead, we thought we would try the route of partnership and consensus. In particular, not just working with the park's communities, but importantly, with the tourism sector itself at a local and at national levels. 20-odd years ago, that was considered really radical. And a lot of our fellow environmental NGOs in Europe thought that we were flirting with the devil. Now, working with other sectors in the trails and the parks communities is considered normal, in fact, almost obligatory. But we essentially just want to work with people who would give the tourists a better, deeper, meaningful, nature-positive experience. And at that time, we wrote a seminal report called Loving Them to Death, which is what we believed was happening to our parks. We're actually rewriting that report now, and it's called Restoring Them to Life. But what are we up against? Last year, there were 1.3 billion travels internationally. That's almost the entire population of China moving across the world. 707 million of them come to Europe. It's still the most visited destination globally. Half of the people who come to Europe say that going to a nature place is part of their visit. Do the maths. Now, in 2024, Europe is at 99% of its pre-pandemic tourism levels. The tourist industry are really happy about that. I'm not sure we're as happy. International travel accounts for 8% of carbon emissions. Now, that doesn't include anything that's happening on the ground or the destinations or the resorts themselves, so I suspect that that figure is actually quite a bit higher. So what's driving this tourism, other than our insatiable curiosity? Now, I'm going to flip through these because of time constraints very quickly, but I do know that you're going to get copies of the presentations or certainly the films afterwards, so you'll have an opportunity to read these in detail a bit later. But one of the big drivers of tourism is, of course, there's political and economic drivers. And I would suggest that the fact that there is no tax on aviation fuel is actually one of the biggest drivers of all. That no tax on aviation fuel is what gave birth to the rise of many low-cost airlines and probably is what brought us, most of us, here. Other drivers is the tourism model itself. You saw the figures from the UN that I just presented a moment ago. Very good at measuring and capturing data, but we're just only capturing numbers. We're not measuring quality or impacts. There's also been a very, as most of you will recognize from the images, a very big drive in recent years to use film and social media as one of the aspects to attract people to an area, possibly an area that might not necessarily have had the infrastructure to manage large numbers of people. And there's, of course, societal drivers too. People just want to be able to think that they can go anywhere and do anything, experience anything at any time. We want to be associated with locations that we've seen on social media. We have FOMO, the fear of missing out. There's something exciting happening in Canada. Let's all go there. I'm not even going to mention bucket lists because I can't stand them. Instagram are very proud of the fact that within 10 clicks, you can get from seeing an image to being in that location. And that's exactly what happened here in Trolltunga in Norway. Between 2009 and 2014, that's 5 years, the visitation here went from 5,000 people a year to 40,000 people a year, entirely driven by social media. Because sometimes we don't necessarily show the real picture or the real story. Because I do think one of the big drivers or challenges that we have in tourism, whether it's sustainable tourism, regenerative tourism, or mass tourism, is framing the message. Tourism agencies, national and global, promote a national park or an area or a trail, but I quite often find that their messaging or their promotion is not necessarily aligned with the values of the park or of the trail. So as you saw in Trolltunga, telling the real story, showing different perspectives of the place, I think is really important, and we as the Parks and Trails community need to get some control over that. So taking all of this in mind, our Charter for Sustainable Tourism is trying to address those drivers and those triggers at the local level. Because what we want to do is to create places that are on a journey to become economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable and regenerative. We want to be in balance and harmony with nature. We want to create places that provide a meaningful quality experience that safeguards those natural and cultural values, that supports local livelihoods, the quality of life, and is economically viable. And you heard the words from the people in the film themselves. And dare I say that film, every single one of those interviews was a one take. I just literally went up and asked them a question, and what you heard was what came from their hearts, and I think that's what makes it really authentic. And I've wandered off my point now. So in order to develop sustainable or regenerative tourism, it absolutely has to come from a bottom-up approach. Absolutely. It has to come from those that you've heard in the film who live and work and who invite tourists to these places or to the trails. And the best way of finding out what is best for that area is to ask them and to listen to them. Because inside those conversations, inside the Charter for Sustainable Tourism, is a methodology where the park and the protected area is at its core, and the values of and needs of the natural and cultural landscape and the people who live and work in there is at its centre. Because we are ostensibly a nature organisation, not a tourism agency. So in order to fulfil the functions of the Charter for Sustainable Tourism, the parks work with all the stakeholders. They agree a strategy and a plan, and we heard about strategies this morning, but not everybody agrees, and that's a hard process. And I always say, work with the living, not the dead, because success will follow success, and if you just start the process, others will join in and follow. You can't wait for everybody to want to agree. So we need to agree a strategy and a plan with the participation of all the actors there, and to make sure, more importantly, that strategy and the plan is implemented. And that's where EUROPARC comes along. That we assess and verify both the partnerships, because the partnership is really important between the community, the businesses, and the park. We assess that and verify that, and we assess the success or the implementation of the plan, and we do that with independent verifiers every 5 years. And at first we verify and assess the strategy and the plan for the destination, and then we verify and assess any businesses who want to work with the park on that. And that can be hotels, it can be restaurants, it can be tour guides, it can be everything. And we have a methodology for that too. And we'd be looking at things like energy management, water management, use of plastics, cleaning products, food used. So yeah, look around your hotel and ask those questions. And then we looked for tour operators or travel agencies who are bringing people to those places, and they too have a methodology to gain a certification to be certified sustainable through our process as well. So what essentially we're creating is a virtuous cycle. People bring people to the park in a sustainable way, they enjoy sustainable accommodations, sustainable food, you saw all in the film, in a sustainable destination where the communities are on a journey. It's not a destination, it's a journey to be more sustainable. Let's see how that works in a couple of quick examples. I'll take you on a very fast guided tour across Europe. Let's go first to the Cinque Terre in the northwest of Italy. As you can see, it's clinging on to this very rocky coastline. And it's been there for centuries. This delicate balance of terraces, of drainage and water management creates a landscape that's rich in food production and biodiversity. The bay too is really important for the anchovy fishing. But as time has gone by, like many rural areas, people have left. And with fewer people to tend the terraces, they've fallen into disrepair. So there came a point when the silt washing into the bay from the increasing soil washing through the destroyed terraces was adversely affecting the fishing industry. And this was all compounded by a massive increase in tourism. The 4,000 inhabitants of the 5 villages are swamped by 2.5 million visitors a year. The trails, which crisscross all of the terraces, are only 0.5 metre wide and are absolutely choked with people. And then a massive storm brought down an entire hillside and almost destroyed one of the villages. So the tourism model was broken. The municipalities, the region, the villages, and the national park came together under our charter to rethink that model for the benefit of the land, their culture, and indeed the future, to regenerate their area. And now they've rethought the model. Some routes are now permanently closed, others you need access for, and they're driving people through apps and other things to lesser used areas. They have more control over the transport infrastructure. You can only get to this area through train and boat. Cars are much further away, you have to get bussed in. So with the train companies, they now have a park card, and if you pay, therefore, to come into the park with that card, but you get the best benefits that any tourist wants. Free Wi-Fi and access to toilets. It's 2 things that all tourists need. But more importantly, they've got some control over the messaging of their area. So now, with a new collective vision, they're rebuilding the walls, rebuilding their communities, and restoring the area. So the Charter has really helped them socially and culturally. Another trip over to Spain, to Catalonia, to the Parc Natural de la Zona Volcánica de la Garrocha. Now this was an area this was a park that was surrounded by, I think, about 23 small municipalities. There was a real lack of coordination of the tourism offer, and indeed very bad and conflicting relationships between the businesses and the public administrations, and a real lack of communication between the municipalities themselves. So when things were at their absolute worst, the then park director, members of the EUROPARC Federation, saw that EUROPARC was looking for pilot areas to test out this new charter. And he thought, well, it can't get any worse, can it? So they became one of our very first sustainable tourism destinations. 10 years later, they undertook an economic survey to see what this new sustainable tourism model that they had collectively created had brought to them. And there you see the numbers. 99 million euros of public and private investment over 10 years brought in 700 million of income into the area. The municipalities were very happy, and they were really talking to each other now. And it took that vision, it took that strategy, it took that implementation to really drive that process. And finally, let's just jump over to Portugal and to the Azores. Now here, a local bird NGO were very alarmed at the decline of the tiny little Priolo bullfinch bird here. Oops, sorry, just went back. Back one. Now, the bird organisation, obviously, we're doing conservation actions to try and protect the Priolo. Oh, I'm jumping, sorry. But in addition to the conservation actions, they wanted to look at the coexistence of the Priolo with the tourism sector. So now, now you can see that the Priolo is the totem species for this island, and it's part of their tourism offer. And the tourism is helping to protect the Priolo. We're determined to celebrate success. So let's just go on and do it. Let's celebrate our success. So we invite our parks who achieve our award and our businesses to a prestigious awards ceremony at the European Parliament every year, where our parks and people, as you saw in the film there, proudly tell their stories to high-level politicians and decision makers. So finally, what have we learned on our journey of sustainable and regenerative tourism in the last 20 years? Well, as well as celebrating success, we've learned that we need to know what you value and capture your vision. A vision that's for people and for nature. To get perspective, and to never stop learning. We've just created the European Nature Academy, and our first ever course on that was sustainable tourism. Make that strategy, because the creation of the strategy brings that partnership together. It's all very well and good having a vision, but it needs a plan to bring it to life. And a great plan attracts ideas, attracts people, and attracts money. And that can only be done by working together. And that is hard work. It takes an average of 5 years for our parks to achieve that first award and that first certification, and at least another 5 to 10 years to really see the difference and make the change. This is a long-term investment. Keep your eyes open for opportunities, particularly with the tourism and other sectors. We're really working with the health sector now on health tourism. You've already joined a network, so there, you're halfway there. And finally, this is tough work. We are facing the challenge of climate change and biodiversity loss, and of those big tourism drivers we mentioned earlier. And sometimes it seems as if we're heading backwards. So find your support community. Hold on and never give up. Because we in EUROPARC believe that sustainable tourism is a state of mind, a conscious choice to work and live and be on holiday in a different way, realising that our choices affect the local environment, the culture and the economy, and that we should positively reshape our behaviours and reshape the environments in which we are visiting, making sure that we can regenerate, restore and sustain our parks, our trails and our people.